Well, good morning. I'm Laurel. It's nice to see everybody here today. And everything that I've heard today pretty much fits in with what I've been thinking about and wrote about for today, which has to do, of course, with the passage of time and the changing of the seasons. And yes, we have seasons. New people are like, oh, there's no seasons down here, but it's just not true. Of course, we have seasons. We have spring, regular summer, really, really, really summer, kind of summer, and then sort of winter. So yeah, no, seriously. We do have our seasons here, but of course it is a much more subtle energy than perhaps where we came from or where our ancestors came from. Certainly for me, my ancestors were from the Great White North for the most part, and I would say the vast majority of people that I know have some sort of Northern European ancestry. And it is the mythology of those ancestors that I enjoy utilizing when I am practicing my spiritual path. There's a lot of ways to think about things, and certainly time and spirit and how those two things intertwine and how we recognize them change over time, but essentially I think that our ancestors had a lot going on, and maybe we give them short shrift sometimes, thinking, well, you know, they were just simple folk. Well, I'm not so sure that I agree with that. I think that our ancestors had extremely active imaginations, and they tapped into that field of what Jung would call the collective unconscious, that everybody was using similar symbologies and mythologies to inform them about how life worked. And learned people, their druids, their shamans, their priestesses, helped them to gather those images from the firmament, if you will, in their own imaginations. And as quantum theory is starting to recognize, there is this field that we can tap into, that we are ultimately involved with at all times. And those kinds of mythological figures and mythological storylines really work for me when I am looking for some spiritual feedback. And for me, my people pretty much come from the UK, from Scotland, England, and Ireland, and from Germany. And they're very romantic, descriptive conceptions of time and the creation of Earth and the characterization of the great forces that are in play in our universe. I think they recognize that patterns are expressed all around them, and as they are for us, of course, in the stars and the trees and the animals. They animated everything. You could say perhaps they were the first Disneys. Maybe not the first, but certainly one of the most precocious animators of their collective unconscious. And they recognize, maybe would be a better way to put it, the very spirit or essence of things that were all around them. In our modern minds, we often struggle to see the very essence of things. And I liked what Brian just had to say about just, you know, moving around outdoors and listening for things that perhaps your mind just, you know, I don't need that, I don't need that. Because we've trained ourselves to believe in a sort of mechanized view in which we are machines in a machine world, in a clockwork galaxy. And I just, you know, I get it, I totally get it. I've struggled with that dichotomy for a long time, but ultimately my spirit yearns for something a little more fun. So we think of our earth and our bodies in that machine kind of way because we have a whole entire culture built on that. But I think that our ancestors kind of thought of their way of thinking of things as their form of science. I think, why struggle? I struggled with that dichotomy. I'm like, why struggle? What's the point? My rational mind knows all this information that's been gathered over the millennia that says, wow, you know, there's all these neat things that have to do with the physical world and outer space and everything else. But my heart still responds to mythological and I guess we'd say ancestral memory about how to look at it. So I know that in my heart, science and mythology are necessary and that we need facts. We build amazing machines. We perform great feats. But all of that grows out of the fertile land of imagination. Yeah, I know, I teach 7-year-olds. I say it all the time, use your imagination. It is our mind's eye. We see with our mind's eye things that do not actually exist. And yet now we are learning that indeed their images must already exist or we could not see them. So that's like, you know, the new thing that I'm sort of twirling around with right now. But that field of potential in which all things exist, if we have already thought about it, then it already exists. If we are thinking about it, it already exists. It boils down to me, for me, that we are already all scientists and inventors by the very act of tapping our imaginations. And it's not just, you know, goody two-shoes stuff for elementary school kids. It's really real. And to me, that is magic. That is what magic is about, is tapping that field of potential and finding a way to get what you need to happen. But even if we don't take action, our images are still there. I don't know if this has ever happened to you, but I have noticed from time to time that some invention that I say to my husband, you know what would be really cool is if we had like an automatic head scratching machine, you know? And then, oh, you're watching late night TV and it comes on, oh, buy our automatic head scratching machine, it's only $19.95, you know? And you're like, well, that's my idea. How did they do that? They're tapping that same place, that same field of potential that we're all sharing, whether we like it or not or believe it or not, and having the same idea. Hence, in history, we have a variety of different cultural aspects popping up in different places all at once. And one of the things that, as a teacher and as a library lady, we like to do is do a variety of Cinderella stories. There are Cinderella stories from numerous cultures, from Asia right on through. They're all essentially the same thing. Poor little girl, boo-hoo, daddy dies, whatever, stepmom's mean, blah, blah. She has to find her way out of the situation, and in one way or another she does. In the Chinese or Korean version, she has a magical fish that helps her, and so on and so forth. And many times the female in other countries' versions is strictly on her own. Her job is to get where she's going and not necessarily be saved by somebody else. So that's kind of interesting, but nevertheless, it sort of proves that thing to me that people, wherever they may be, are still tapping into that one field. And that field to me, I guess I sort of think of as the goddess. The goddess is all. She is never ending and never beginning. She just is. And when we tap into that, we're tapping into our connection to the goddess, that which is potential. The ancestors who I connect to were perfectly rational, practical, hardworking people, and they shared their visions and their collective imaginations, and that gave rise to some amazing images for them. It was the science of their day, and those images remain in that field of potential since somebody imagined them, and we tap into those images that they've already created. Of course, one area, well, there are several areas, but one area that differs greatly from our current modern perception is the acceptance of death and of change and of recycling the spirit back into matter over and over again. That spirit is endless, but that it has to continually take a new form in matter, because matter, in our case, in living beings, does not last forever. And it was tragic, but it wasn't totally, it wasn't the end of the world for them. They knew that the next baby was coming, and so on and so forth. And as long as all the cycles continued to move, everything was okay. And it gives me a certain level of comfort when I think about the people that I have lost or that are suffering and about to move to the next level. And I started thinking about the tides, because we talk about, how time moves, and we think of it as a linear progression. It goes down a ray, and there's, lines on the ray, and we check off the years, But really, I think time is much more fluid and swirly than that, and sometimes time seems to go on forever when you're at a meeting that you just can't wait to get out of, and other times time just flies just so fast, and you think to yourself, is that just my perception, or is that really real? I think it's both, because your perception is your reality. So I'm thinking about the tides, and of course we live at the ocean, and we have high tide, low tide every day, and we have a full moon tide and a low moon tide every month. And then we have tides that carry over throughout the year. And for us right now, we've come from high tide at Yule, which most people in the old days used to say Yule tide, happy Yule tide. And at Yule, it is dark, but there is a seed of light, which is about to become brighter and brighter and brighter over time. And we celebrate that potentiality, taking in that seed of light and allowing it to get bigger, get brighter. And of course, our real sun does that in the sky according to our way of looking at things. But the potentiality, the goddess aspect, is the darkness of the universe. She is the enveloping and closing womb of potential, waiting for that little spark to explode and to grow. The god, on the other hand, kind of represents matter. And so all creations that are alive, that are animated, the matter of the universe that changes is in his realm. So all the animals and the trees and the people and all the things are in his realm, but because they are, he too has to go through the cycles that we have to go through, where matter deteriorates, goes back to earth, and is reborn through a recycling process. And that's what the cauldron for Wiccans or witches represents, that recycling center where spirits can be cleansed and refreshed and brought forth again. So back to the tides. High tide starts at Yule, and it gets, it's low tide at that point, and we begin to move towards our high tide. And we're like swimming around and having a great old time. And the light becomes so strong, especially here in Florida, that it's almost loud. It was incredibly loud light this summer. I don't know about you guys, but I was like, wow, it is so bright out there.
Yeah.
It's the symbol for that particular tide is the eternal presence of the god as she waxes and wanes endlessly. And then our creation person, our god, he's kind of like a surfing dude on her tides. He surfs the tides. So I was thinking about, the kids down here and shark bites and all that stuff, and I thought, well, it's sort of like our god. He's out there surfing on her tides and hoping that no sharks are going to bite him in the ankles.
Why haven't they given us more waves?
Well, he has to go through it in a certain way, So his birth in midwinter at Yuletide, which of course many different religions celebrate in different ways. He symbolizes the light that is about to begin to grow in strength, and he symbolizes the rebirth of matter, which is about to become evident as spring comes along and plants and trees begin to turn green again. And he also releases the waters of the tides as they flow out of her. So he splashes around happily at the beach. He's growing up quickly, but his mother just thinks he's the greatest thing ever, as most moms do. And finally, rather quickly, but finally reaches his most brilliant self, the most ultimate expression of his, I guess, masculine aspect at midsummer, when the sun is at its brightest, it's at its zenith. And so there he is us. He is all of animate creation, and he reaches the epitome of his beauty and strength. And then, as all life must do, he declines. He doesn't drop dead, he declines. He ages, but he gains wisdom. He has visions. And these he will take with him now as he saddles up for his ride into the west. Into the sunset he goes.
It's on your feet.
So, at this point, we've already had our first harvest, technically. I know we all have tons of food available to us, but if we throw our minds back to a rural agricultural scene, grains have already been harvested at this point. Certainly corn is done, and really at this stage of the game there should be, have already been a cutting of wheat and other forms of grain. And now we are harvesting our tree crops. So all the trees are ready to be denuded of their fruit, so the apples and so on, the nuts. Seed corn at this stage, anything that would be for feeding animals and for planting next year would be ready. And gourds and pumpkins and things like that to store away for the upcoming darkness. There is a third harvest which comes at Halloween or at Samhain, and that is the harvest of meat and the gleanings from the fields. And that one is a much more severe and final harvest in which the god finally not only leaves this earth for a while, but takes with him any souls who have been wandering around not sure what to do, and brings them with him into the land of the dead, where he goes to rest and recuperate and wait for his next rebirth at Yule. So now we're entering this time, this second harvest. It's not dark yet, it's not scary cold yet, it's still beautiful, there's a good deal of romping left to do. And we've got a lot of things already put up, and we're making apple pies. We're having a great old time for ourselves, and the sun is still beautiful, the leaves are changing, everything's nice. But you know, you can see it in the animals, they're putting stuff away too. Birds are flying away. If you've ever lived up north, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Things change, and even here, our light changes, the quality of the light changes rapidly at this point. I don't know about you, but I mean, it was light out at 9:15 not that long ago, and now it's about 7:30 and it's over.
Yeah.
So it does change, and the angle of the light changes, and you can feel that. I swear that's what our brains actually react to, is that angle, and of course the depletion over time of that light. But honestly, I think it's the angle more than anything. But anyway, we enter now a time of reflection. It's a great time to go out and sit somewhere and write some poetry, write in your journal, thinking back over the short amount of time that has just passed since last winter. What did you accomplish? Did you plant seeds at, the past season that have come to fruition? Were they great? Was it as good as you thought, or was it a little bit sour? Did you not plant seeds that you kind of wished you had? Can you still plant them next year? Can you move through this next cycle more fruitfully? Can you make better decisions based on the wisdom you have gained over this past cycle? Were you a little too emotional with someone or something? Did you let somebody throw you off? I do that all the time. I'm a very emotional person, and so naturally everything is, all about me, But I have to step back from that and say, okay, no, we've moved through that already. What is this really about? What is this reflection really about? How do I handle this if it should happen to me again? What's my game plan going to be for next go round? So, in a sense, that is what our God does. He moves away from the physical and into the land of spirit. He reflects upon that incarnation, if you will, through all of the animated creatures, and then moves back into the physical world at Yule or Christmas. And it's a great time to just walk on the beach, on the edge of the water. You're at the liminal edge of the earth. You are between the earth and the water. Walk right on that edge, 1 foot in and 1 foot on the sand. It's a really cool way to kind of get yourself in line with what's happening right now as we move from the heat and the intensity of the summer into the calm, cooling energies of the fall. And for us, we hope that it breaks pretty soon. It's breaking.
2 weeks.
It's breaking. Yet at the same time, it's also a time of hustle and bustle. It is a time when you're, in the olden times, in any place where people are still living a somewhat agricultural life, they're putting up food, the kids are back to school, everybody's studying, buses are going, the traffic is intense, people are, shopping, they're doing more cooking, you gotta change the air filter on the AC, bring the car in, make sure it's okay. On all that stuff is reflected back out. We are a micro of the macro, and they are a macro of our micro. And for the God, as he's heading west, he's playing his little flute, and he's calling out the deer, he's calling out the turkeys, he's calling out the wild boars, who would have been the source of protein and sustenance throughout the rest of this coming winter season for our ancestors. And of course, who we kind of take for granted in our new way of chicken and beef and everything else. But he brings them forth. That's part of his job as he's moving out. Come on, everybody come on out. And that gives us our opportunity to go through our final harvesting stage. So the tide is now rushing away from the beach. You know how it pulls at your feet and your feet start to go down in? That's where we're starting to go. It's starting to move out, and we are exposed to ourselves right now. What did you do this past growing season, and how will you use what you learned? What of your crops grew well and what failed? Which one of your dreams were you able to bring into being? And which ones do you still hang on to and hope to see? We could go through the typical symbolism of sprinkling leaves and all that stuff. But some of the ritual aspects of being awakened don't really translate to the place that we live here. As much as I rely on that mythology to inform me, I also want to be real about where I am. So I'm looking for ways to express these ancient mythologies in a more Florida-friendly kind of way. But I've noticed over the years that, you get jellyfish runs, you've got, your shark bite times, you've got various things that happen. And I think the main thing, like Brian said, is to just be really aware and alert to what is happening in your life and all around you, and how you fit into that pattern, and how you're tapping into that big field of potential, and what you are gaining from your physical matter being here. and what you're giving back into the physical matter being of our earth. That's pretty much it, really. I think that, you know, most of us can pretty much relate to the idea of time changing and moving. And we know that things are going to be lost and things are also going to be reborn. I, of course, believe in reincarnation, but I don't think you even have to believe in it specifically as a practice that humans go through, but that spirit moves through matter and is created continually through what we see as our goddess, that which always gives out that potential to the spark, which is zooming around, waiting to be planted and grow. Thank you.